welcome to another edition of the Sewing Guru and the final video within this waistcoat collection. So in this video I'm going to show you how to put on your buttons and buttonholes onto your waistcoat. Now of course for this you're going to need your buttons. Now I've got mine here and I'm going to be putting 5 buttons on here. So of course that means I've got to put in 5 buttonholes with the sewing machine. So the first thing what we need to do is we need to mark these buttonholes on the front. So what we're going to do is take this over to the pattern table and I'm going to show you just how to do that and mark your buttonholes in place. Okay, so here we have the waistcoat laid out, and this is the panel we're going to be working with to put our buttonholes in place. Now, if you're wearing the waistcoat, it's going to be your left, and if you look at somebody wearing the waistcoat, you're going to be looking at the right hand side panel. So as you're looking directly at this waistcoat, it's going to be the right hand side panel, and of course that's always the case with a gents waistcoat or any gents garment for that matter. So this is the panel we're going to be working with. So we're going to align our buttonholes along the front part here. Now I'm going to be putting in 5 buttons on the front of mine, so they're going to look something like this when they're finished. So it'll be something like that. Now of course what we've got to do is we've got to position these so all of our buttons and buttonholes are completely even and even spacing apart. Now there's a really easy trick to do this, and you don't really need a tape measure at all, especially when you've got an odd number of either 5 or 3. If you've got an even number of either 4 or 6 or something like that, then you've got to measure them with a tape measure. But of course, because I've got 5, I can do it in this special little way. So first of all, what you need to do is put the first positioning of where your first buttonhole is going to be. Now it's always going to be on the break point of the lapel, which will be here. So of course that will sit in there like that. And the second buttonhole we're going to position at near enough the bottom of the waistcoat there. Okay, so we've got these 2 in position. So the third one needs to be exactly in the middle between these 2 pins. So all you do is put the 2 pins together, exactly together in alignment like that, and just press with your thumb like that until you've got a sort of a crease. Fold this back over and you can see the crease here, and we can now put our third pin in place. So that is exactly in the middle of these 2 here. So if I put these 2 pins together like that, you can see that that's right in the middle. And we need to do that now with another pin here and another pin here. So exactly the same. Go this way. Put the 2 pins together like that, and just basically just press down on here until you've got your groove. And of course that is going to be the middle marking of between these 2 pins. So I've got my groove here, and we can put the pin in place just here so that that is completely in the middle of these 2 pins here. And of course we're going to do that with these as well. So the final pin in place, and it's a real easy little technique to use. You don't need a tape measure, and of course our buttonholes will be exactly in alignment. So put the final pin in there like that. What you can do is just test the pins again to make sure that they are exactly in the middle before we start marking them up. And of course, you can actually put your tape measure on there, so that measures 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, and that's it. So they're all 4.5 centimetres evened out. So that is an easy way to place your pins so that they're all evened out. But this just works with odd numbers. Even numbers you've got to actually measure with your tape measure. Okay, so that's an easy little way. So the next thing what we need to do, of course, we need to measure our width of the button. So my button measures about 1.7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting keyhole buttonholes in here, and I'm going to make my buttonhole length 2.5 centimetres. So I know that there's going to be enough space for the button to fit through the buttonhole. So we're going to have it as a 2.5 centimetre length buttonhole. Now, buttonholes always start a centimetre in from the edge. So we're going to be going 3.5 centimetres out. So the next pin, what we're going to do is mark that 3.5 centimetres out, like that. I'm just going to put a cross on there, like that. Okay, and of course we're going to do that with the second one. Now I've got a line here exactly where my buttonhole is going to start, because I've got stripes on my waistcoat, so that's 3.5, and again 3.5 exactly on this line here. So let's just place another pin just on that line, like that. Put another pin here. So it's exactly in alignment. Okay, now I'm going to do this for all of them. And with my chalk, I'm just going to mark exactly on the cross point of where my pins are. Okay, now I'm not going to take my pins out until I need them and they're near the sewing machine. Okay, and I'm just about to put my buttonhole in place. But that is how you mark your buttonholes ready to go in. So I'm going to carry on doing these final 3 here, and then I'm going to take the waistcoat over to the sewing machine and we're going to be putting the buttonhole in place. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine, and as you can see I've marked all of my buttonholes in place, okay, with pins. Now I've already done the first buttonhole here, as you can see, okay, and it's a keyhole buttonhole because it looks like a keyhole. Now if you don't have a keyhole on your machine, you can actually just use a standard buttonhole for a shirt, but of course in the industry we always put keyhole buttonholes into the front of waistcoats, just like you would a jacket. So I would recommend to always do a first sample to start with, just to see how your buttonhole is going to look. Okay, because if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter, it's on scrap fabric. So always do a first sample buttonhole first of all, in the fabric of course that you've used. Now as you can see, I've put my first buttonhole in place, so this is exactly what we're going to do. So of course you need your tape measure for this, because of course we need to get the length of the buttonhole, which will correspond to the grooves in this foot. Now I use a Bernina sewing machine, and the feet are fantastic because they've got a small groove at the side exactly where the needle is. So we can always gauge the length and get the exact size of the buttonhole we need due to this small groove on the presser foot. So the buttonhole will actually finish up being 2.5 centimetres in length, and we're going to be 1 centimetre away from the edge of the cloth, okay, because the whole thing measures from here to here 3.5. So we've got to do our first beading of the buttonhole, which is going to measure 2 centimetres, and then it will actually form the rounded bit of the keyhole top of the buttonhole. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, because I've marked with chalk the exact start point of the buttonhole, that's where we're going to start. Okay, and you always start at the furthest away point of the buttonhole, not the edge of the fabric here on the edge of the waistcoat. No, you start inside. So this starts off where I've marked with my chalk. So let's just put the presser foot down, and I can see from the groove of my foot, a small groove here, we're in alignment with the small chalk mark. So I'm going to position my tape measure along the side of the foot so that we can get the first row of beading exactly 2 centimeters in length. Okay, so let's just start off with that. So we're just going to go across 2 centimeters. Now don't force the sewing machine, just allow the sewing machine to just run as it wants to. Now we've got to about 2 centimeters there, slightly further. Yeah, that's fine. And now we're going to do the head of the keyhole. See that? The head is now forming. And we're now back to the original beading. And we're now going back. Now this is a manual buttonhole, and I find these so much easier than the automatic ones, because you can then emphasize and control the actual buttonhole as it's going to be and as it forms. And if you make a mistake, you can always go back and redo it. It's very easy. And then we've got the top bit, and that's our buttonhole now complete. And as you can see, we've now got the buttonhole in place. Cut those little strands off, and again underneath. There we go. And as you can see, I've now got my 2 buttonholes in place, and they are completely aligned, and they start off at the exact same place. So they are both exactly the same. So let's just measure these. So this one measures 2.5 and this one measures 2.5. So we've got the exact same length of buttonhole there. So I'm going to carry on putting the other 3 buttonholes in place, and then I'm going to show you how to open these keyhole buttonholes and then just close them up with our buttonhole glue. Okay, so as you can see, I put all of my buttonholes in place, and what I've done is I've already opened up 2 of the buttonholes, but these are not open at all. And as you can see, this is the button I'm going to be using. It just slides through the buttonhole very, very easily. So what we need to do is cut these buttonholes open. So I've got an unpicker, okay, and I've also got some scissors, which are embroidery scissors, but they're very, very sharp, so it's very, very easy just to cut the little hole out and things like that. And also I've got fray check. And what fray check does is it basically prevents the buttonhole from fraying, and it sort of adds a kind of a slight glue to the buttonhole. So what we need to do is just position our unpicker into the buttonhole between the beading and just push like that. Now don't go too far, because of course you might slip and go like that, and then of course you've ruined the whole buttonhole. So just cut a little bit so that you can get your scissors in. So just snip to the end like that. And then also we're going to snip around the actual keyhole part. So we're opening up the keyhole. Now of course in industry we don't need to do this, because there's a machine with a keyhole type blade which comes down and just stamps through the keyhole buttonhole itself, causing this really nice opening. So of course that's what happens in the industry, but because we don't have a buttonhole machine, we have to just improvise and do it by hand. So just make sure that you just cut around the keyhole part like that. Make sure that all of the little threads are out of the way. And then with our fray check, we're just going to add a little bit of glue. So we just need to just do this with the cloth, okay, as I've got there. And then just on the top of the beading, just put some glue on there. Okay, we don't need a lot, but just a nice amount of glue so that it's going to just close off and bond the buttonhole. Okay. Now you can blow it on a bit like that, but of course it will look as if it's a bit dark. Okay, this one also is a little bit dark, but as it dries it will just lighten and go like this one. As you can see, this is the first one we've done, and that's now light again. This one's still a little bit dark because of course the fray check is still drying, and of course this one is very dark because we've just put fray check on there. But eventually this will dry and it will look like that. So I'm going to carry on and open up these two as well. Okay, like this. Okay, and when I've done that, I'm then ready to align my buttons in place by using the buttonholes. Okay, so as you can see, I've now opened up all of my buttonholes, and we're now ready to position our buttons in place. So of course they're all in alignment so that the waistcoat can close up properly. So of course when this is finished, it's going to look something like that. So the first what we need to do is just position our waistcoat front onto the other part here, like that. Okay, and make sure that this is completely in alignment. And then with a pin, I'm just going to put the pin through to the keyhole and then through like that. So there's our first buttonhole aligned. Okay, like that. So now what we're going to do is position exactly as what we did with our buttonholes. We're going to cross our pins, ready to put our chalk mark in place. So the best bet is just to position your fronts on there like so, and then just align like that where the button is going to go. Now of course what you can do is you can get your tape measure and align each one. So mine are 4.5 centimetres each one in width apart. So what we can do is measure this 4.5, so we've got one here at 4.5 as well. Just put another pin there, like that. Another one here at 4.5, like that. And finally our last one again at 4.5, like that. Okay, so if I position my buttonholes, you can see that they are all completely in alignment with the pins. Now, you need to get your buttons so that they are going to look correct on the front of the waistcoat. Okay, you don't want them too far in, unless of course that's some style feature, but you need to put them so that they're going to look correct. Okay, now again, what I would do is position your buttons as far in as where your keyhole part is. So my keyhole part measures 1.5 from the edge. See that? 1.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pin 1.5 from the edge and see what that looks like. So that's our first pin there, okay, with the button. So put our button on the edge there, And yeah, that's okay, that's fine. Let's put it further in. We can put it further in. Now that looks better to me, okay? Rather than right on the edge, just there is perfect. Now I've got mine exactly on the line there, so I'm lucky because I've got stripes on here. But of course mine will then measure 2 centimetres in. So you can do that, measure 2 centimetres in with the crossed pin like that, okay, for each one. Now I don't need to measure that in now because of course, like I say, I've got the line which is going to help me because I've got stripes on my waistcoat. So we're just going to put the cross pin on the line like that. So now all of our pins are crossed and they're completely in alignment with our buttonholes. And if we put our buttons just on the cross points like that, I would say that that looks very nice, and that's going to look really good when the buttons are attached. So the next thing is again just on the cross point, mark with the tailor's chalk. So you've got these marks exactly where the button is going to be attached. Now of course what you can do is attach these by hand, or you can take them over to the sewing machine and attach them with the sewing machine. But if you're going to be attaching them by hand, you need to attach them so that you've got like a shank and they stand up above the cloth, so that of course when your waistcoat is attached, the button is going to lie nicely on the top of the cloth and not really pressed in, okay? Because that's the worst thing you want. So the button needs to just lie just nicely on the top of the cloth. So of course you've got this bulk of cloth here which needs to be compensated with the button. So you need to create a small shank. Now of course when you put your button on, you just stitch the button on and then underneath just turn with your fabric, with your thread, like that underneath, which causes this shank, okay? And then you just knot your thread and your button is then attached. Now I'm going to go and take mine over to the sewing machine and I'm going to attach my buttons in place. And when I've done that, we're going to have a look at our completed waistcoat. Now here we are at the mannequin with our finished waistcoat. We'll put our buttons and buttonholes in place, and the whole thing is really nice. I'm very pleased with that because it looks really good. If we just turn it round, we can see that the lining and everything is sitting really nicely. Now this waistcoat is actually slightly too big for the mannequin, but it will fit me, or I measured it to fit me anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to just take this waistcoat off the mannequin and I'm going to try this on to see what this looks like. Now as you can see, this waistcoat fitted over the top of another waistcoat there because this is actually slightly too big for the mannequin. So let's just see what this is like. Now already I can feel that this is really nice. And the buttons fit nicely, they're just standing apart or just slightly above the cloth, okay, so there's going to be no distortion when the waistcoat's closed, because if they were too tight, like I explained before, if they were too tight you'd get your waistcoat with these sort of indentations and you don't want that, okay, so the buttons nicely sit above the cloth, compensating for this other panel where the buttonholes are to sit nicely together, okay, and as you can see, that's looking really nice. I'm very pleased with that. It feels great and it looks good as well. So if you've created the waistcoat like I have, then congratulations, because you've done a great job. So that's it. That is the waistcoat with lapels complete. And always remember, practice makes perfect.